Ethan Cole wiped the last streak of dust from the conference table on the 10th floor of Von Corp's sleek New York headquarters. The clock on the wall ticked past 8:45 p.m., and the city lights glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows like distant stars. He needed just 15 minutes to finish this room and get back to the staff break room where he'd left Noah. His 3-month-old son had a slight fever, but after a bottle feeding, the baby had settled into a fitful sleep in the makeshift crib Ethan had fashioned from a padded box and a thin blanket. It wasn't ideal, but as a night janitor, Ethan had no choice. Daycare was too expensive and he couldn't afford to miss a shift. He moved quickly, his mop gliding across the polished floor with practiced efficiency. The building was quiet at this hour, most employees long gone chasing after their evenings in the bustling streets below. Ethan paused for a second, listening. No cries from the break room down the hall. Good. Noah was holding steady. With a final swipe, he gathered his supplies and headed back, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. As he approached the door, something felt off. The room wasn't silent. There was a soft, rhythmic sound breathing, but not the shallow wheeze of his feverish infant. Ethan's hand froze on the doorknob. The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of warm yellow light spilling into the hall. He pushed it open slowly, his heart pounding. What he saw stopped him cold. Seated on the worn leather armchair in the corner was Amelia Vaughn, the CEO of Von Corp herself. The woman everyone whispered about, the ice queen of the tech world with her sharp suits and sharper decisions. She had shed her blazer, which lay folded neatly on the side table, and her white blouse was partially unbuttoned. Nestled against her chest was Noah, his tiny mouth latched on, nursing contentedly. Amelia's hand cradled the back of his head gently, her fingers stroking his fine hair, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The world tilted. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. This couldn't be real. His son, his vulnerable motherless boy, was being fed by the most untouchable woman in the building. 1,000 instincts surged through him, scream rush forward, snatch Noah away. But he didn't move, because Noah wasn't crying. His little face wasn't scrunched in frustration like it so often was during bottle feedings. No frantic gulps, no sputtering milk down his chin. For the first time in weeks, the baby looked peaceful, his eyelids heavy with satisfaction. Amelia looked up, then her steel-gray eyes meeting Ethan's without a flicker of embarrassment. She didn't startle or pull away. Instead, she spoke in that calm, authoritative voice that commanded boardrooms. "Don't pull him away just yet. He couldn't take the bottle. I heard him crying for 10 minutes straight, and instinct took over. I couldn't stop myself." Ethan's mouth opened, but no words came. His fists clenched at his sides, knuckles white. How had she even gotten in here? This was the staff break room off limits to executives. And why her of all people? Why the woman who'd never spared him a glance in the elevators, who signed his paychecks from a distant office high above? He stepped inside, slowly closing the door behind him with a soft click, as if any sudden noise might shatter the bizarre scene. He sank into the chair opposite her, his legs unsteady. Up close, Amelia looked different, not the polished powerhouse from company memos, but a woman with faint shadows under her eyes, her hair slightly tousled, from the long day. Noah made a small contented sound, his tiny hand flexing against her skin. Ethan watched, torn between gratitude and horror. This crossed every line, professional, personal, everything. But seeing his son calm, fed and safe, it pierced something deep inside him. "If you want me to leave," Amelia began, her voice steady, but she didn't finish. She simply adjusted the blanket around Noah, her movements maternal and unhurried. Ethan shook his head, the motion jerky. "No, just let him finish." His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the faint suckling sounds and the distant hum of the city outside. Ethan stared at the floor, his mind racing. Grace's death on the delivery table had left him shattered, drowning in medical bills and grief. He'd learned to bottle feed Noah through trial and error, but nothing replaced a mother's touch. And now this stranger, this powerful, distant woman, had given his son exactly that. Minutes stretched on, feeling like hours. Finally, Noah's suckling slowed his body, going limp in sleep. Amelia carefully detached him, buttoning her blouse with one hand while supporting his head with the other. She handed him back to Ethan, their fingers brushing briefly. "He's a fighter," she said softly. "Like his father, I suppose." Ethan took Noah, cradling him close, the warmth of his son's body grounding him. "Thank you," he managed, though the words felt inadequate. Amelia stood slipping back into her blazer, her composure returning like armor. She nodded once and left without another word, the door clicking shut behind her. That night, as Ethan walked home through the chilly New York streets, Noah slept soundly against his chest. But Ethan couldn't shake the image from his mind. What had just happened defied everything: boundaries, expectations, logic. And 3 days later, when a cryptic text arrived offering help again, he knew this strange connection was far from over. Ethan Cole stared at his phone screen 3 days after that surreal evening, the anonymous text glowing in the dim light of his cramped Brooklyn apartment. "I have time at 5 p.m. today. If you need help with Noah, I can make it work." No name, no pleasantries, just a straightforward offer. He knew it was her Amelia Vaughn, the CEO who'd somehow bridged the impossible gap between their worlds in one unexpected act. His thumb hovered over the reply button. Part of him wanted to delete it to pretend the whole thing hadn't happened. But Noah had fussed through another bottle that morning, spitting up half of it, his tiny face red with frustration. Ethan sighed, typing back a simple, "Okay. Break room." He arrived at the Vaughn Corp building early, Noah bundled in his arms, the baby's fever finally broken, but his feeding issues lingering. The staff break room felt different now, less like a forgotten corner and more like a threshold he'd crossed without permission. Amelia was already there, seated in the same armchair, her usual power suit replaced by a simple blouse and slacks. She stood when he entered, her expression neutral, but her eyes softening at the sight of the infant. "Thank you for coming," Ethan said, his voice low as he handed Noah over. The baby immediately nuzzled into her as if recognizing the comfort from before. Amelia sat back down, adjusting her blouse with the same unself-conscious efficiency. "I didn't expect any of this," he added, taking the opposite chair. She nodded, focusing on Noah as he latched on. "Neither did I, but he needed it, and I couldn't walk away." Ethan watched them, a mix of emotions churning inside him. At 28, his life hadn't turned out like he'd planned. He'd been a machine repairman in a small factory upstate, steady work with decent pay. That's where he'd met Grace, at a church volunteer event sorting donations for a food drive. She was kind, with a laugh that lit up rooms, and they'd married young, dreaming of a simple life. When she got pregnant, it felt like everything was falling into place. But complications during delivery had taken her, leaving Ethan with a newborn, a mountain of hospital bills, and a grief that hollowed him out. He'd moved to the city for the janitor job at Vaughn Corp. Night shifts paid better, and he could sneak Noah in when needed. But every failed bottle feeding reminded him of his inadequacies. He envied the fathers with wives who could nurse effortlessly, who didn't have to measure formula in the dead of night while fighting back tears. Amelia's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "He's calmer now. You must be exhausted doing this alone." Ethan rubbed his eyes. "Yeah. Grace, my wife, she died giving birth to him. I try, but it's not the same." Her hand paused mid-stroke on Noah's back. For a moment, vulnerability flickered across her face, the iron facade cracking. "I'm sorry. That's unimaginable." She hesitated, then continued softly. "I lost a child once, 10 years ago. I was climbing the ranks at my old company, in love with someone I thought would stay. But when I got pregnant, the pressure, the hours, I miscarried at 5 months. He left me after that, said it was too much." Ethan's breath caught. Amelia Vaughn, the untouchable executive, sharing something so raw. At 39, she was a legend in the tech world, CEO of Vaughn Corp., a powerhouse in software development known for her ruthless efficiency and zero-tolerance policies. Employees called her the steel wall behind closed doors, never married, no public personal life, no scandals. She'd built her empire from nothing, rising through cutthroat boardrooms where emotions were liabilities. But that loss had sealed her off, turning her into the isolated figure she was now. She envied mothers who got to hold their babies, who didn't have to bury dreams under corporate ladders. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, meaning it. "That must have changed everything." She looked away, her voice steady but laced with old pain. "It did. I threw myself into work. No distractions, no attachments. Until I heard him crying that night, it woke something up." Noah finished nursing his eyelids, fluttering shut in contentment. Amelia handed him back carefully, buttoning up as Ethan cradled his son. For the first time, they talked, really talked, about the guilt that lingered, the what-ifs that haunted quiet moments. Ethan admitted his jealousy of intact families. Amelia confessed her fear of never being enough for anyone. The conversation flowed awkwardly at first, then naturally, two people bound by shared shadows. Over the next few evenings, Ethan let her help again. Not every day, but enough to ease Noah's struggles. The baby thrived under her care, gaining weight steadily. But whispers started in the hallways, curious glances from other janitors, a security guard mentioning blurry camera footage of Ethan entering the executive floors after hours. Ethan ignored it, at first focused on his son's well-being. He didn't realize how quickly those whispers would turn into something sharper, more dangerous, until an anonymous email landed in HR's inbox accusing impropriety and blurring lines that could shatter everything. The whispers started subtly like ripples in a pond, but they spread fast through the gleaming corridors of Vaughn Corp. Ethan noticed them first during his night shifts, a janitor colleague averting his eyes in the supply closet, a security guard muttering something about special treatment under his breath. By the end of the week, the comments grew bolder. "Must be nice getting cozy with the boss," one coworker sneered as Ethan mopped the lobby. "Doing extra work in a different way, huh?" Ethan clenched his jaw, ignoring them, but the barbs stung. He wasn't using Amelia. He was just trying to keep his son fed and healthy. But in a place like this where hierarchies loomed like the skyscrapers outside, any breach of the invisible lines invited suspicion. Then came the email. Anonymous, of course, sent to HR with the subject line, "Potential breach of professional conduct." It detailed Ethan's late-night visits to the executive floors, mentioned blurry camera footage of him carrying Noah, and hinted at inappropriate interactions with the CEO. No specifics about the nursing, just enough innuendo to ignite paranoia. By morning, the rumor mill had turned it into something salacious. Was the janitor leveraging his kid for favors? Was the ice queen melting for a subordinate? Amelia was summoned to a closed-door meeting that afternoon in the boardroom on the top floor. The room was stark, all glass and steel, with a long table flanked by stern-faced executives and the company's lead counsel. She sat at the head, her posture impeccable, but inside a storm brewed. The lawyer slid a folder across the table, summarizing the complaint. "No laws broken," he said flatly. "But the optics, they're damaging. A CEO involved personally with a low-level employee's child, it raises questions about favoritism boundaries." One board member, an older man with a perpetual frown, leaned forward. "Amelia, we've built this company on trust and professionalism. If word gets out," she met his gaze evenly. "Word about what? That I helped a child who couldn't eat? That I acted on instinct because I've been there, lost a pregnancy, felt that void." The room fell silent. It was the first time she'd shared her past in a professional setting, the miscarriage that had scarred her a decade ago. If compassion is a liability here, then perhaps I'm the wrong fit. The board exchanged uneasy glances. They couldn't fire her outright. Her track record was impeccable, but the pressure was clear. "We suggest a temporary leave," the counsel said, "to let this blow over. Oh, protect the company's image." Amelia left the meeting with her head high, but the weight pressed down. That evening she texted Ethan, "We need to talk." He didn't respond immediately, and when she arrived at his apartment unannounced, the door was ajar, boxes scattered across the living room floor. Ethan was packing Noah asleep in a playpen nearby. Clothes, toys, a few framed photos of Grace, everything crammed into cardboard as if he were erasing his life. "What are you doing?" Amelia asked, stepping inside, her voice sharper than intended. "Leaving," Ethan replied without looking up. He folded a blanket methodically, his hands steady, but his eyes shadowed. "I quit today. Found a job at a warehouse upstate. Better hours, less complications. Because of the rumors. She closed the door, her composure cracking. Ethan, that's ridiculous. We can fight this. He straightened, facing her at last. Fight with the stares. The whispers about me using you, or worse, about Noah not being mine. I heard the email went around. People are saying things, twisted things. I can handle the judgment on me, but not on him. He doesn't deserve to grow up under a cloud of doubt. Amelia's chest tightened. So, you're running. After everything. I'm protecting him. Ethan shot back his voice, rising slightly before he glanced at the sleeping baby and lowered it. You think I haven't thought about the boundaries ACEO nursing my son? It's kind, but it's also ammunition for people who don't understand. Society draws lines for a reason. If roles were reversed, I'd be called a predator. But even now, they're painting you as desperate and me as opportunistic. She stepped closer, her eyes flashing. And you believe that I did this to fill some void, like I'm selfish? Ethan paused, running a hand through his hair. No. I know why you did it, because you're human, because you've lost too. But admitting that means admitting something's growing here, something good, and I'm scared it'll get torn apart. I lost Grace. I can't lose that hope again. The air thickened with unspoken truths. Amelia's eyes welled up, but she didn't cry. I did it for Noah at first, but now it's more. I crossed that line because for once I didn't care about the board or the image. If that's wrong, then maybe the world's rules are broken. Ethan reached out his hand, resting on her shoulder, their first real touch beyond necessity. You're not wrong. You've given me back a piece of faith I thought was gone forever. They stood there, the moment fragile, no promises exchanged. But in that silence, a decision formed. They wouldn't run from each other. As Amelia left, the rumors had already leaked online, a blog post twisting the story into scandal. The storm was coming bigger than either anticipated, ready to test if their fragile bond could withstand the world's judgment. The storm hit harder than either of them expected. Within hours of the anonymous blog post, CEO's secret late-night encounters with janitor's baby, the story exploded across social media and tabloid sites. Hashtags like #corporate-boundaries and #VaughnScandal trended, with comments piling up by the thousands. Disgusting power imbalance, one user wrote. She's exploiting a desperate father. Others targeted Ethan, lazy single dad using his kid for a handout. Amelia's inbox flooded with interview requests from gossip outlets, while Ethan faced sidelong glares from neighbors in his building. One morning, as he pushed Noah's stroller to the corner store, a woman muttered, "Opportunist," loud enough for him to hear. He kept his head down, but the isolation gnawed at him. They leaned on each other in those early days, their meetings shifting from the break room to neutral ground, quiet parks in Central Park or Amelia's understated apartment overlooking the Hudson. She arranged for a specialist to consult on Noah's feeding issues, covering the costs discreetly through a company health fund. In return, Ethan listened as she vented about the board's scrutiny, his presence a steady anchor. One evening, as they walked along the river path with Noah dozing in his carrier, Amelia paused under a street lamp. I keep replaying that boardroom from 10 years ago, she said, her voice distant. Flashbacks came unbidden, the sterile office where executives had subtly pressured her to prioritize work over her pregnancy, the doctor's cold confirmation of the miscarriage, the empty nursery she'd never used. I chose the company then. Now, I'm not sure I can again. Ethan nodded, sharing his own ghosts. Grace's last words were about Noah, how she'd love him forever. I see her in his eyes sometimes, and it breaks me. He described the delivery room chaos, the doctor's frantic efforts, the silence after. I blame myself for not being enough. But you've given him what I couldn't. Their conversations deepened, weaving through grief and guilt, revealing vulnerabilities neither had shared before. Amelia admitted her envy of mothers who got second chances. Ethan confessed his fear of failing Noah like he'd failed to save Grace. These moments built a quiet intimacy. No grand gestures, just shared silences and small acts of care. Noah thriving now with a mix of formula and occasional nursing sessions that tapered off as he adjusted became their bridge. The baby reached for Amelia's finger during walks, his coos drawing smiles from her that softened her guarded edges. The climax came in a tense emergency board meeting the following Monday. The room was packed with executives, lawyers flipping through dossiers of emails, social media screenshots, and risk assessments. The fallout could tank our stock, one board member argued. Investors are skittish about ethics scandals. The council nodded. Legally clean, but publicly it's a minefield. If genders were swapped, it'd be harassment claims. Amelia stood unfolding a single sheet of paper, her resignation speech. If our boundaries mean ignoring a child's cry for 10 minutes while his father works to keep us all employed, she read steadily, then those boundaries are flawed. I helped because I've lost a child. Because compassion isn't a policy violation, it's human. The room shifted uncomfortably. If Vaughn Corp values image over integrity, I'm out. She left the meeting without waiting for a vote, her future uncertain. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat at his laptop drafting a public post on his rarely used social media account. Not a defense, not a rant, just the truth. One night, my son cried for 2 hours because he couldn't take a bottle. A woman who'd lost her own unborn child knelt down and nursed him like he was hers. She wasn't my wife or lover. She was just human. And in that moment, I believed kindness doesn't need titles. If you've had a child, you'll understand. He hit publish, tagging no one, expecting nothing. The response was gradual but profound. Shares trickled in from single parents, miscarriage survivors, even a few Vaughn Corp employees. Stories poured out mothers who'd helped strangers' fathers who'd accepted unconventional aid. The narrative shifted from scandal to debate, then to empathy. Tabloids pivoted to the human side of corporate power, and the backlash quieted. Healing came in waves. The board, facing internal pushback, reinstated Amelia with a new policy on employee family support. She pivoted her energy to founding a nonprofit center for single parents, channeling her experience into resources for feeding clinics and grief counseling. Ethan stayed on his schedule, adjusted for flexibility, no longer hiding Noah during shifts. Their bond grew organically. Shared lunches turned into dinners park, walks into quiet evenings at her place. One night as Noah played on the floor, Ethan asked, "Do you regret it crossing that line?" Amelia shook her head. "I only regret living so long without daring to be kind." They sat closer that evening, hands brushing the spark of something more, igniting slowly. Not rushed, not defined yet, but real. As weeks passed, they recognized the budding affection not born of obligation, but of mutual respect and shared scars. It was enough for now to face whatever came next together. 1 year later, the dust from the scandal had settled into something almost forgotten, like an old headline buried in search results. Amelia Vaughn no longer sat at the helm of Vaughn Corp full-time. She'd negotiated a graceful exit, channeling her severance and influence into founding the Grace Haven Center, a nonprofit in Lower Manhattan dedicated to supporting single parents. The facility offered feeding clinics, grief counseling, and flexible workspaces, drawing families from across the city. Amelia thrived there, her days filled with purpose rather than boardroom battles. She still consulted for tech firms, but the steel wall had softened her smiles, more frequent her decisions guided by empathy as much as efficiency. Ethan Cole had risen quietly through the ranks at a smaller firm nearby, his janitorial days behind him. With Amelia's quiet endorsement, he'd landed a facilities management role that allowed daytime hours and benefits. The medical debts from Grace's passing were paid off through anonymous donations, Amelia's doing, though she never admitted it. Noah now, a sturdy toddler with curly hair and an infectious laugh, toddled through their lives like a beacon. He'd outgrown his feeding struggles, transitioning fully to solids months ago, but the bond he'd formed with Amelia remained unbreakable. He called her Mimi in his babbling voice, reaching for her whenever she entered the room. Their relationship had evolved slowly without fanfare or declarations. It started with those park walks and shared dinners, building into something deeper, over coffee-fueled late nights, discussing dreams and regrets. Ethan had taken her hand one autumn evening as they watched Noah play in the leaves, and she'd squeezed back, no words needed. They weren't married yet, but they shared a quiet rhythm, weekends at her apartment, holidays blending their solitary traditions. Ethan introduced her to Grace's old recipes. Amelia taught Noah simple songs from her childhood. It wasn't about filling voids. It was about creating new space together. One crisp spring morning, they sat on a bench in Central Park, Noah chasing pigeons nearby. Ethan turned to her, his voice steady. Looking back, that first night, I was terrified, but you gave us more than milk. You gave me hope that I wasn't failing him alone. Amelia leaned her head on his shoulder, watching their boy. And you showed me I could still be a mother in my own way. Not perfect, but real. She paused, her gray eyes reflective. The world tried to tear it apart, those emails, the posts, the judgments, but we stood firm. He nodded, pulling her closer. Kindness doesn't always fit neatly into rules. You crossed a line society draws, but it was the right one. I don't love you because you nursed my son. I love you because you weren't afraid to be wrong in their eyes, to save a child. She smiled, a rare, unguarded expression. And I love you for seeing me not the CEO, but the woman who needed to heal too. Noah ran back, then tumbling into their laps with a handful of dandelions. Amelia scooped him up, holding him tight as he nestled against her chest, his breathing evening out into sleep. For the first time since Grace's death, Ethan felt whole, not replaced, but expanded. Their family wasn't conventional, born not of tradition, but of courage and quiet defiance. As the sun warmed the park, they walked home together, hands linked, ready for whatever came next. If this story has touched your heart, reminding you that true compassion often defies boundaries and that healing comes from unexpected places, share it with someone who needs a spark of hope today. Subscribe for more tales of resilience and human connection, and tell me in the comments, has an act of kindness ever changed your life in ways you never imagined?